All right, so today I have the legend, Mike Brungardt, who spent like 17 years with the San Antonio Spurs. Coach, uh, I know we talked a little bit before, but still, can you like introduce yourself a little bit?
Well, uh, yeah, my name is Mike Brungardt. I was a strength coach for the Spurs for 17 years. I was actually a head wrestling coach once upon a time, way back, right after I graduated from college up in Nebraska. And I've been around sports my whole life, and so it's an important part of who I am, and it makes it, like we talked. I haven't worked a day in my life because I've always been doing what I like to do. Yeah.
Nice, nice. So, uh, talk to me about like spending 17 years in one organization, especially at this era. Like, it's almost impossible to do that, but like, what is it like to spend 17 years in just one organization?
Well, it's funny you asked that because I can remember when I told Pop that I said, Pop, I'm done. I'm going to retire. And he says, Brung, you don't want to do that. You want to stay. And I said, Pop, I said, you know, uh, you and me, we're an anomaly right now. I said, most guys in this league have had a year or two off here and there and, moved to a different organization. I said, we've had 17 straight years of this. And I said, I don't get any time off because my off season is just as important as the in season. So, yeah, it's a grind. It's all consuming. I loved every minute of it, but toward the end, I think the travel and all those other aspects um, got to be more of a grind for me. But it was very nice to be in one organization that whole time, not having to relocate, knowing the people within the organization, and all of the benefits that go along with that. Yeah.
Nice. So start from 1994 to like 2011. You work with the legends like David Robinson, uh Tim Duncan, uh Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, all those guys. Believe it or not, like growing up, I was actually a huge San Antonio Spurs fan. Although like I work with Nuggets right now, but I love Tim Duncan my whole life. So, and think one thing I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but like one thing when I was in Taiwan was when I was a kid, I always noticed is like your team is all like compared to every other team, like your team are almost one of the healthiest. So like talk to me about how do you prep the guys during off season and how do you help them keeping the guys healthy throughout the season?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that because that's obviously a big issue in the NBA right now is health. And as everyone knows, the greatest ability is reliability or availability, especially for your superstars. And so, you know, my whole philosophy revolved around um, we can talk about two kinds of load here, okay, if you want.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Acute load and chronic load. And acute load is obviously when you play. And chronic load is when you prepare. That's when you practice. That's your off season. It's your lifting. It's your conditioning. It's all of those different things. And what we do know is that if the chronic load isn't sufficient, then you will probably break down in the acute phase. So we always approach the off season as a very, very important time to number one, we wanted to reset the body. Okay. It's just been through a big season. We played deep into the playoffs every year. So we take a little time off and then we wanted to reset the body. And part of that was I wanted to get players off the court. Okay. I wanted them in the weight room, but conditioning wise, too, I wanted to get them off the court. So we would go to the track and we would work on lengthening our stride again, different movement patterns, different foot patterns, rather than the same repetitive types of things that you often get if you just stay in the gym all the time and just work basketball stuff. So we wanted to get away from that, reset the body, and it seemed, it worked for us for sure. I know that, Tim Duncan only missed one off season with me his entire career, and that was the off season we had right after we won our first championship. And it was, it was a long season, or we ended late in that season because it was a lockout year. And he went right into USA basketball right after that. So he had no real off season that particular year, but every other year after that, he was in religiously and running the track, lifting weights, doing those types of things. And David Robinson was another guy who was very good about working out. And when your superstars do that, everyone else kind of falls in place that way too. They want to work out too. So that kind of added to what we did. And I kind of took my philosophy that way is to really working them hard in the off season in a different way. From guys like Jerry Rice, who played in the NFL, okay, played forever at a very high level. Darrell Green, who played for the Redskins in the NFL. They were Redskins at that time, the Commanders now. Um, and, they were very, very disciplined in what they did in the off season. I mean, they worked hard, and, and it wasn't time off for them. It was time to prepare their body for the next season. And so I knew for a fact that that type of attitude and that type of philosophy would work.
So let's dive a little bit deeper into this. So different types of movement, can you like give me some example about like what would you do that's different? And then like we all read all those textbook about like periodization
Mhm.
and strength, hypertrophy, max strength, power, all that stuff. Is that also a thing you would focus on for basketball players?
Absolutely. I mean, periodization is, well, we'll start with periodization and then we'll go to movement patterns here after a bit. But periodization is the core of everything you do because you want to establish that hypertrophy phase. And when you're reset, you want to reestablish that hypertrophy phase. And then you want to move into your power and your strength power and those types of phases in there as you get closer to the season. And it's a more effective and efficient way to train. Now, I will say that over the years, as I got further and further into my career, I moved more toward an undulating periodization rather than the standard one. So we would work more with that type of a periodization scheme, and I just liked it better because it was, I had guys that were more advanced in lifting at that point in time because they'd been with me for a long time. But if I was starting out with a younger player, I would go through a standard periodization phase where I did the hypertrophy, and we're going 4 week cycles because you want to make the adaptations. If you cut it off too quick, if you try to change it too quick, if you don't give them that 4 weeks, then we know from scientific fact that the the body doesn't make all the adaptations you want it to make. So you have to stick with it for a period of time in there. So for the younger athletes, and especially if we get into the really younger athletes like high school and college and so on, that becomes a very, very important concept to continue to follow so that you establish all of the things that you want to establish with them. Now, as far as movement goes, when a basketball player is on the court, they're doing all kinds of cutting and change of direction and short bursts of speed. And so what we would do in the off season is we'd get them on the track and we would start with longer bursts of speed. And we'd do, like, for example, a prep phase would be we'd do a 100-yard stride. Okay, so we're not sprinting, but we're not jogging either. 100-yard stride, we'd walk back 20 yards or meters, and then we'd sprint. Okay. And then we'd repeat that back the other direction. And we'd build it up to about 1,500 meters of that's what we were building up to. And then we would move into, so over a period of a week, couple of weeks, we would build up to that. A couple of times a week, we would get out on the track and do that type of thing or on the football field. And then we would move into the track itself and we would do 400s, 300s, 200s, and 100s. So we're getting at the very extremes of that energy system there, which basketball players use, which is the anaerobic glycolytic system and or the lactic acid system. And we wanted to establish a huge base in that with the 400s, 300s, 200s, and 100s, and also lengthen their stride. Okay, because when we're running those, those aren't short movements. We're we're covering a lot of space and we're lengthening the stride and we're working our running form and all those types of things to get better. And then we would go into shorter stuff where we go into after a month of that, we go into the 100 yard strides, 80-yard strides, and then 60-yard sprints, 40-yard sprints, 20-yard sprints, 10-yard sprints. We go back up that ladder, same exact way, and just working the shorter sprints and the the narrower end really of that anaerobic glycolytic phase, and even into the anaerobic phase on that to work that. As far as all the cutting stuff, we didn't really get back into that until the last month before the season. When we're starting to play pickup ball, we started to reintroduce all kinds of cutting and change of direction stuff, and would move more toward the floor at that point in time.
Nice, nice. So, uh, you mentioned a lot of times about the energy system. Nowadays, I feel like strength coaches work for all type of sport, probably move away from that because like we've probably focused more on like explosiveness whatsoever. Do you think that's like, especially like at this era, the speed of the game are getting faster and faster, but do you still feel
Yeah.
like that's a thing like we need to develop?
Absolutely, because we're resetting the body, like I said, and we're reestablishing the very basis to which you do those other things that you just talked about. So if we establish those bases first, then we're going to be a lot more successful in initiating. And they may get a kind of a slow start right into camp, as they're adjusting more and more. But as that base just stays there, and as they get into the season more and more, they just get quicker and quicker and faster, and they can handle the loads even better. So, all of those are important. And one other thing I might mention to you, you talked about periodization. We periodize energy system training too. Okay. That's very, very important. So we match our lifting periodization with our energy system training conditioning periodization at the same time, so that when we're working hypertrophy, we're working the longer sprints, right? The 400s and 300s, so on. When we start to move into strength and strength power in the weight room, we move into those shorter sprints and work more speed and more explosiveness.
Nice, nice. So, when we talk about like lifting or like no, when we talk about like monitoring fatigue, because it's really hard to finish a 82 game season and plus like all those playoff and you guys like and you guys play to the final like multiple times. It's like hundred games per season. So outside of like a really good off season training, how do you manage that during the season?
Well, see, that's always a tough, scenario there. You kind of walking a fine line a lot of times. Back when I was there, we played 7 games in 10 days, 2 or 3 times a year. We would play 4 and 5 at least 4 or 5 or 6 times a year, and we played a ton of back-to-backs uh, in an 82 game season. And it's just, we fortunately we had a head coach who had a great eye, okay, for players. This was back before we used all the data and all the other analytics, but he could see if a player was looking, and I could tell in the weight room too if a player was starting to wear down a little bit, and we'd back off him a little bit at that point in time. uh, so you always got to keep your eye on that, and it's all about, we talk about evaluating movement and all these functional screens and things that people do. Really, when we're in the weight room, we're doing it every time we're in the weight room, because we're watching and monitoring athletes, watching them go through ranges of motions, watching them perform the lifts, and to what capacity they can perform them at. And so, that those types of things happen every day. And if you're noticing something about a player where he's starting to drop off significantly and he needs a little break, you're going to bring it up with the coach. You're going to bring it up with the trainer. And fortunately, we had a coach that was very much, attuned to those types of things at that point in time too. So, but It's a tough call. I know that, today everyone's looking, what's the secret sauce? There is no secret sauce because every player's different biomechanically, attitude wise, all these, we can't even measure all the stress that they're under because what if they got stress at home and we don't even know what's going on there? Because that adds up too. So, one of the things that I thought would be an important way to measure these things and also make some decisions off of would be to do cortisol testing with them to see what their stress levels were and compare it to their baselines and everything. And when you knew that, yeah, there's a lot of cortisol release, they're under heavy stress right now. Yeah, you're gonna have to adjust maybe.
Mm. Uh, so you guys, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but like it's probably because uh the way you guys handle load. So there are more and more people talk about load management, but like outside of like a monitor cortisol level, is there anything else like you guys would track like heart rate or like internal load? Because back in days, like you don't have like connects on a Caterpillar like the LPS GPS data, right?
It was just starting to come in when I was leaving, actually, a lot of the measurement devices and so on. Uh, and so, no, we didn't have that. I would do some testing though throughout the season where we do a power test to see what our power was, and we'd be able to compare it. Uh, and we had a bike that actually we could sprint on for 15 to 20 seconds and even 5 second bursts, and we get power ratings off that. And I'd always get, obviously we get our during the off season, we get those power ratings before the season started, so we had our base levels. And then whenever we test again, if that's starting to drop off, then we know we're going to have to make some adjustments too. So that's part of the equation that you could use data wise, but we didn't have any of the other types of things that are in existence today. I mean, today they're doing digital capture on the game days. I mean, they're doing equations. I mean, it's there's a lot of science out there.
Yeah, yes. Um, so the following question is like you mentioned power test, like is it like vertical jump or what is it?
Yeah, I would do vertical jump. Uh, I would do that bike power test, and we would also do one-legged standing long jump. Okay, because horizontal displacement is just as important as vertical displacement. I got into that more as we got into Ginobili and the Europeans coming into our group because of the Euro step and everything. But covering space horizontally is just as important as covering it vertically a lot of times. And so we would start measuring those aspects too.
Nice, nice. Um, Obviously like at this era, it's the same like 82 games, playoff potentially like 100 or 100 something. Um, but somehow like we are getting more and more like soft tissue injuries,
Yeah.
hamstring, groin, those type of injuries used to happen only for like track athletes or like hockey players. Why do you think there are more and more like these type of injury popping up?
The only thing that I can think of, and see, I don't know because I'm not in the weight room with anyone or any organization right now, so I don't know what they're programming. And I don't know what their off season's like, but the only thing I can tell you is that I have to assume that maybe the chronic load for those guys isn't sufficient to handle the acute, so they're not getting enough done. Uh, and the other part to it too is there's certain aspects of, my whole philosophy of weight training was we started on the platform and we moved out from there. Okay. Now, when I say we started on the platform, we started with the Olympic lifts. We did the cleans, jerks, snatches, all of those types of things, along with the auxiliary lifts that, obviously front squat, back squat, lunging, RDLs, and all those types of things. And then we would move out from there for other special needs for a particular player, just for that thing. But everyone started on the platform, and that was the foundation of everything we did. And I've always believed that that's an important component because I think if you train for power, then you survive power. Okay. So, triple extension with all of those lifts is very important. Another concept is triple flexion is also important. Now, we wouldn't catch in deep squats with these guys because they're too tall. You know, I didn't want to catch in a deep squat with a 7 footer. Their lever systems are crazy, right? So we would always catch in the power position with all of our athletes, and then we would do a controlled descent from there, so that we didn't, you know, do anything to the tendons or anything like that coming down into it. So, but I have to believe, to me anyway, I believe in the Olympic lifts as a great tool uh, to train any athlete with, and we just have to keep in mind that we're not trying to turn them into Olympic lifters. We're trying to use the Olympic lifts to help them be better athletes and help be better prepared to be on the court.
So, stupid question, but does Tim Duncan also power clean with a full clean catch?
Absolutely. He came out of Wake Forest. He was 4 years in college, and so he was in a Division I school, and they traditionally teach the Olympic lifts. So when he came to the Spurs, he already knew how to do those types of things. Tony Parker didn't know how to do any of that stuff. You know, we had to teach him from day one. Manu Ginobili actually came in and he knew how to do some of that stuff. He was decent, uh, decent, technician there. Uh, David Robinson really didn't do a lot of that at the Naval Academy, so we had to teach him more so on that. But and then Sean Elliott, though, had always done it when he was at Arizona. So it just depended on the athlete, and it depended on what their background was with their college and everything like that. But yeah, for sure.
Nice, nice. Because I was actually talking to my mentor, like Coach Boo Boo Schexnayder and Dan Path, and they're like, Olympic weightlifting are the most underrated lift, especially nowadays. Like there are more and more research. People try to like replace other lift with Olympic weightlifting, and like some of them think like that are probably one of the reason we have more and more injuries throughout every team sport.
I I totally agree. And here's the deal: um, is I hear people tell me all the time, well, there's other ways to get around what the Olympic lifts do. We can do it this way and we can do it. You can't. Okay. You can say you can do it, but there's always a certain component that's going to be missing in there. So, for example, there's a ton, if I'm going to power clean from the floor, which I don't do in season, but I do off season all the time. We're going to do more hang cleans and stuff like that in season. But no matter what, but if I'm power cleaning from the floor, from the lift all the way up over the knee, there's a ton of stuff that happens with the body right there that's hard to mimic anywhere else. But the other part too, then, is that on the explosion to the catch, when you get into that catch, your core is engaged in a huge way and stabilizing your entire body. And you don't get that with other types of lifts that you're trying to replace the Olympic lifts with. The snatch for basketball, think about that. Everything's overhead in basketball, so that's the block. That's the finish. We even do a lot of dumbbell snatches too, just because it's a lot of one arm stuff in the NBA or in basketball in general. But also to catch in that position and then be able to squat with that overhead squat. Think about body position, hip mobility, all those other aspects. Those are hard to mimic in any other type of lifting program.
Mm,
So.
nice, nice. So let's dive a little bit deeper into like your weight room training philosophy. I know like a lot of the track coaches would do like high day high, low day low, which means like high CNS day they only do like uh Olympic weightlifting or like squats, and low they do some sort of like hypertrophy circuit or body weight circuit whatsoever. And I know like there's different like philosophy that there have different blocks of the lift. What would be your approach to like off-season lifting?
So we would, as I moved in we'll get into the undulating aspect here. As we moved into the undulating periodization more and more, it would vary from day to day, and we would usually do a 3 day lift instead of a 4 day lift, just because, you know, I always had the philosophy that we train the body as a unit, okay, because we play as a unit. So we want to train the body as a unit. So uh, no matter what day we were in, um, it would like maybe have a heavy day Monday, we'd go a lighter and a speed day maybe on a Wednesday, and then kind of a mix on a Friday, that type of thing. And then the next week we'd add in different intensities throughout the week. So that would change throughout there. But on the speed days, maybe a few more reps, obviously, because we're going much lighter and we're trying to work bar speed and all these types of things. But I would also do like a heavier leg day on a Monday, okay, with the Olympics. On a Wednesday, we would do like a one set um, lower body thing, and then I'd take them out to one of my favorite tools of all time, which I had them build at our practice facility, which was the hill. Okay, and the hill is a 45-degree angle hill. We built it. It's got a 30-meter sprint path to the top with a little 10-meter, resting area up there. And we would run that hill on that Wednesday. Then when we did a one setter of the legs, they'd still feel like they got a squat workout at the end of the hill workout because I mean, but basketball players relate to it. It's all about movement. So now the hill was always incorporated that way. So we would do a heavy on the platform one day. The next day, then we're moving into the hill with a light on the platform, and we're doing everything on the hill. And we can do all kinds of things on a hill that we can't do in a stadium, right? Stadium steps were always a big way to train, but you get a flat foot plant on the stadium and you can only do certain movements. Whereas on the hill, we get that loaded Achilles all the time running up the hill. We have to pull with the posterior chain all the time, your hamstrings, when you're running forward through there. So it's huge hamstring loads coming all the way up to the top of the hill. And we could do skips. You can't do those on steps going up. We could do speed skates, which you really can't do on steps going up. We could do all kinds of different movement patterns running up there. And then, when we run up backwards, we could load the quads a little bit, obviously, that way. You can't go backwards up the steps. Uh, so we could hit those things. And then we even get upper body where we do bear crawls down and then come back up backwards. So we're working those shoulders and everything like that. And we do them sideways up and down the hill. And crab walks the same way. So we'd get a full body workout in there on the hill, but it was all just like a natural aspect there. And the thing that I loved about it, though, was that natural foot plant going up the hill, the load on the Achilles all the time. So we're strengthening that Achilles all the way up in a regular type of motion, right? Running, which we normally do, okay, and as an athlete, and the ability to be very versatile there to move in all these different foot patterns and stuff up the hill.
We talk a lot about like
By the way,
lean. Yeah.
excuse me, I'm going to interrupt real quickly. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. We never ran down that hill, okay? Because it's too steep. It's a 45-degree angle. We always walked back, recovered on the way, walking down the hill, and then get ready for the next one. Okay.
So at the same time, walking down the hill probably also like help them uh get actually that's probably a really good deceleration training and help them from patella tendonitis, right?
No, no question about it. When you slide up the hill, think about ankle mobility. When you're running up the hill, we got it one way. When we slide up and down, and sometimes I'd have them slide down the hill slowly. All of a sudden, you get that side to side ankle mobility, and when you're walking forward down the hill, you get that forward ankle mobility in there too. So there's that benefit.
Nice. And uh we talk a lot about like linear movement. What about like lateral, especially groin pain, adductor strain is also a big thing in recent years. So how do you like what do you implement in your program that like kind of help mitigate or prevent these type of injury?
Okay, so now we would do basic things. We're not going to spend a lot of time on a four-way hip, but we would always do the four-way hip because we wanted to make sure that we were balancing out the musculature. A lot of adductor strains are a result of abductors being too weak, and the adductor, is kind of trying to take over too much, and all of a sudden you have an issue with it. So a lot of times it's on the opposite side of a muscle group that is the problem sometimes. But so we would do basic stuff like that just to make sure that our muscular balance was there. And then, we did all kinds of, I love to do band work and different stuff like that on occasion to work into the groin and the abductors a lot and into the glutes. So
Mm.
those would be the main things that we did really in
Yeah.
regards to.
So, I mean, you kind of mentioned this already, but like with more and more technology with force plate, like GPS data, or like especially in the last like 2 years, NBA
Mhm.
are trying to implement this biomechanics lab with the players. I know like some of the team already like implement that for years, are way ahead of the curve. Some of the team like are behind, but whatsoever. Talk to me about like your thoughts about like in at least in the past 10 years, we are trying to implement more and more numbers, more and more data, but like we're getting more and more injuries.
Yeah, it's a dilemma, isn't it? I mean, it's. I'll kind of circle back to why I think it's a dilemma here at the end here, but I like the force plates. That's a good way to get a power rating right away, and an accurate one that you can use throughout the season to start to make some judgments about load and everything like that. Um, Once again, go back to chronic and acute. Everyone's saying there's more times up and down the floor. The game's faster. Well, if that's the case, what has to happen in the chronic phase? It's got to increase to be able to prepare the athlete to handle that new load. If it's more than it's ever been, then the chronic load's going to, and you're like I said, we're walking a fine line because we don't want to, you know, overtrain an athlete. There's always the old adage, the undertrained athlete's all better than the overtrained athlete, but we want to be right there on that line, right? We want to get them as finely tuned as possible. So, especially at the level we're talking about here in the NBA, they need to be at that level to really compete. So, you've got to be sure that there's enough chronic load in there. Um, but some of the other stuff, the biomechanics, I'm all for it. I think it can identify some things for you that you can work on, especially in the off season. If you got a player coming in, a lot of these players have this, and WNBA players have it a lot. Is if they have a valgus, okay, coming, as you notice when they're jumping off a force plate and you're doing biomechanical analysis also at the same time, and you see that valgus, then obviously you want to train those glutes and make sure that we're squatting the correct way with those guys so that they don't we can eliminate that valgus so we don't have that ACL tear uh, out of nowhere just because of the valgus there that we did not address. You got to address it, and you got to make sure that you correct it as much as you possibly can. And it's harder for women, as I said, WNBA, because of that wider pelvic girth. A lot of them have valgus there, and that's why they have more ACLs. But it is what it is. Um, but I was going to circle back into the other part here is, you know, I've been in this for so long, it's ridiculous. But and my mentor was actually the very first strength coach in NBA or in American strength coach history. His name was Alvin Roy, and he was the very first strength coach of all time, and he was with the San Diego Chargers football team, and then with the Kansas City Chiefs. And when he went to Kansas City, they won a Super Bowl. But I got to go up and work out with him. I was in high school at that time, and I got to go up and work out with him in Kansas City all that time. So that was my introduction to everything. So anyway, as we go to this, do you know he was with the Chiefs, I think, for 9 or 10 years? Do you know how many knee surgeries they had in those 9 or 10 years? Zero. Zero knee surgeries. And that's football now. That's what people are trying to take your knees out. I mean, it's just crazy. but zero. All right. So there's something to be said because he was the one who believed in the Olympic lifts. All right. That's was his epiphany about getting involved and becoming as, the first strength coach of all time was to apply the Olympic lifts to athletes. So then, there's this whole scene where D1 schools like Nebraska with Boyd Epley and other schools are they're all getting into weightlifting. They know it's important for football and other sports and everything like that. And so now all this research starts coming out about the benefits of it. And what we know is that if you lift, you're probably going to have less chance of getting injured. And if you do get injured, it probably won't be as severe. And if you do get injured, you'll probably come back quicker. Okay, we knew that from all the research that was happening. This is back in the late 70s, early 80s, and so on, and it's establishing all these things. And then as a result of that, though, we started to try to get too cute, and we went away from Olympic lifting to a point, and we're trying to train the smaller muscles and all these other types of things, and thinking that this is going to be the secret sauce, and so on and so forth. And what we found out, though, is that the best chance that an athlete has of being healthy and available and all these types of things that we talk about is if he's a strength power or she's a strength power athlete, if they train in a strength power mode, then they're probably not going to have as many injuries, if any. Okay. So that means we go back to the simplest solution, which is we started with the Olympic lifts, right? And we go back. It's called Occam's razor. Do you know what Occam's razor is?
Nah,
You can go look it up. Occam's razor is a theorem that says basically the more complex the problem, the simpler the solution is the best. Okay. And the simplest solution for our complex problem that we're talking about right here is to get in, to me, is to get guys in on the platform again, doing the Olympic lifts, making sure we do the chronic load that we need to be doing. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We don't have to have every technology in the world or anything like that. We've got to train the body sufficiently to prepare the athlete to be successful.
nice, nice. I love it. I love it. So, um, it's kind of funny that, like you said, like all you guys, like you, like Dan Path, Coach Wu, and like even some other strength coaches, they have like really great success in their career. They do the basic thing, like Olympic weightlifting, like sprinting, like plyo, drop jump, all those stuff.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Yeah.
and at this era, we have AI. We got more access to like all those information like we could probably never have like 20 years ago, but we're actually getting more and more injuries.
Yeah.
And not just basketball, it's everywhere.
Too much information can paralyze you sometimes, don't you think? I think you're trying to analyze all the information and you got to go back. You just said it right there. Fundamentals. You have to go back to the fundamentals because the body hasn't changed. Technology's changed, obviously, but the body hasn't changed. So you always have to go back. If a basketball player's got no handle, he's probably not going to survive in the NBA. If a basketball player can't move and play defense, he's probably, all of the fundamentals of the sport are still important. That's never going to change. Well, it's the same in the weight room, okay? And in conditioning. Fundamentals are fundamentals, and you have to be sure that you establish the fundamentals in your program and utilize those fundamentals to your best. Now you can branch out into some other things from there too, but the bulk of your time needs to be fundamentals because that's what resets the body. That's what prepares the body. Those are the things that make the huge difference in the long run.
Nice, nice. All right. Another part of this podcast, like I want to ask you about like your experience, your advice. So, I mean, you're with the Spurs for like 17 years and like great success. You guys win multiple championships. Um, at least for us, like I'm in the G League right now, and for
Mhm.
other strength coach in the NBA, like you're a legend, right? So talk to me about like uh for young guys out there, young coaches out there who want to be NBA head strength coaches in the future, like what would be your advice?
Well, a couple of things I think are very, very important. And one is, this is just in business or life, no matter what, okay, is network, okay? Network. Meet people, get to know people, let people know who you are and what you are and everything like that. And sooner or later, that's going to pay off for you in some situation that comes up. Okay. So you always want to network. Always do that. The other thing is, to me, I would always suggest be sure you go back to the fundamentals of what we do. Okay. And so for a lot of guys, part of the reason why a lot of guys don't use the Olympic lifts is not because they're trying to justify it by saying, we can use other ways to do it. They don't know how to teach them. Okay. You have to learn how to teach them. It's a part of your craft, it's a part of your profession. And you can get great teaching skills by going to like a USA weightlifting certification classes. It's a 2-day class, but you'll come out of there with tons of knowledge and you can just continue to grow with that and learn how to apply it. But yeah, try it. I believe that you should move back to the fundamentals of the Olympic lifts and the platform because those are the most, I would say, athletic performance specific lifts that exist. There are no complete replacements for those. Um, and you got to have a philosophy. Okay. It's very important that you have a philosophy on how you want to go about things. Now, this is what I tell people though. Be careful. You know what works. You know what your philosophy is. Don't go out and go to a bunch of seminars or clinics now in the off season, and all of a sudden you're changing about 70% of your program. Okay, because you saw all these new sexy ways to do things or whatever. Now if you have an actual philosophy about how you're going to run your program, you might only change it 1 or 2% every year, and some years maybe not at all. But you still stick with the fundamentals of your philosophy, and then you add to it with those other tools. And some of those tools you may only use with 1 or 2 players. Okay. Just because you picked up something that might help that 1 or 2 player, but it's not going to change your entire program.
Nice, nice. All right. Um, Obviously, like working with one organization, have a lot of like multiple championships, amazing. Working with all those legends, Pop, Tim Duncan, David Robinson, like name all that. Um, is there like a moment in your career that like you feel like this is why I do this? This is why like love doing what I do.
Oh, I'd say there'd be many, many moments probably because I was very fortunate to be with an organization that had a lot of success and we had great players. And so, we always look good when you have great players. They make everyone else look good around them. But, but I will say this, one of the most long lasting and memorable experiences that I can remember is our very first championship year. During that whole playoff run, I can remember walking through our training room into the locker rooms and then weight rooms and stuff like that. And every time I'd go through the training room was where you went through first. There would be Sean Elliott on the table, and all the doctors were around him. And of course, they're not saying anything to me at this point. But anyway, so we go through that whole playoff run, and Sean Elliott, unbelievable. I mean, he is an unbelievable wing defender, and he scores and everything like that. But I mean, he shut down Kobe, okay, from the Lakers in that playoff run. He shut down Isaiah Ryder and Jim Jackson from Portland in that playoff run, and then he shut down and also hit the winning shot 3-pointer on Memorial Day in that series. But and then in the finals against New York, he shut down Spreewell and Houston. And at the end of the season, they put him on dialysis. His kidneys were gone. And he was having, that's why he was in there in that training room that whole time. And so they were shot. He was on dialysis. And fortunately for him, his brother came through and donated a kidney for him, and the transplant and everything was successful. But he wasn't satisfied with that. He wanted to come back and play again. He didn't want to go out that way. So the next year, we went through all of these different scenarios of training him and making sure we didn't dehydrate him too much and making sure that we didn't go too quick or anything like that. He'd get impatient because he wanted to do more. But we finally got to the point where toward the end of the season, he was ready to go and cleared and put him in a game. And I'll never forget, he gets this pass on the wing and he just takes the pass and boom, immediately explodes toward the rim and dunks it. And the entire crowd just goes crazy. And so those are moments that you love like that. Those are reasons why you do things. Yeah.
Nice, nice. That's amazing. That's amazing. That's all the question I have for today. I really appreciate like hopping on a podcast with me. It's a huge honor for me.
Well, thank you very much for having me on because you asked some very, very important questions, and I was glad to give my opinions on all of those things. And I don't mean to degrade anyone on that either. I'm just telling, saying what I believe in and these types of things. So, keep going and keep spreading the word. Good job.
Thank you.